My parents announced a family competition, but it tore us apart forever. I need to tell you about the night my parents gathered us in the living room and destroyed our family with a single announcement. I was 16 years old, sitting on that worn leather couch next to my twin brother Ethan, when our father stood by the fireplace like he was about to pitch a business deal. My mother sat in her usual armchair, that leather-bound notebook open in her lap. I always thought she just liked being organized. She'd been writing in that thing for years, jotting down notes about what we did, what we said, how we performed. I figured it was just Mom being Mom. I was so wrong. Dad cleared his throat. We've called this family meeting to discuss an important change in how this household will operate moving forward. My older sister Emma was 18, fresh-faced, and excited about starting at her dream college. My younger brother Jake was only 14, still young enough to think family meetings were kind of exciting. And Ethan, I could feel him tense up beside me even before Dad started talking. Your mother and I have been raising 4 children, Dad continued, his hands clasped behind his back. We've invested considerable resources, time, and money into each of you. But we've come to realize this approach is inefficient. Inefficient. That's the word he used to describe raising his own kids. So we've decided to implement a competition, Mom added, her voice calm and measured, like she was discussing a grocery list. Over the next few years, we'll be evaluating all of you based on specific criteria. At the end, one child will inherit everything. The others will be financially cut off and removed from the family when they turn 18. The room went completely silent. I remember Jake's confused face as he asked, "Wait, is this like a game show? When do we find out who wins?" Nobody laughed. Emma's face had gone completely white. She'd been planning her college career for years, and our parents had promised to pay for it. All of it. I watched her hands start to shake. Ethan just sat there, frozen. I could feel him barely breathing beside me. Dad launched into the rules like he was presenting a quarterly earnings report. We'd be judged on academic performance, extracurricular achievements, leadership qualities, and something he called life readiness skills. Mom would update our rankings monthly. Each of us would get a score out of 100, and that score would determine everything from our allowances to whether we could participate in family events. The winner would get investment, support, and inheritance. The losers would get the bare minimum required by law until we could be legally cut off from the family. Then Mom opened that notebook and showed us the first month's rankings. Emma, 92 points. First place. Me, 83 points. Second. Ethan, 67 points. Third. Jake, 60 points. Last. She'd been calculating these scores for over a year without telling us. 35% academics, 30% extracurriculars, 15% household contributions, and 20% something she called character assessment. That last category was entirely subjective, based on whatever she decided about our behavior. I asked what would happen if we refused to participate. My father's face went cold in a way I'd never seen before. You're already participating whether you like it or not. You live in my house. You use my money. You follow my rules. This isn't optional. That night, after our parents went to bed, the 4 of us met in Emma's room. Emma was pacing back and forth, angry and terrified at the same time. She'd been the golden child her whole life, and suddenly that position felt threatened. Jake was crying quietly because he couldn't understand why our parents were doing this. Ethan sat on the floor with his back against the wall, staring at nothing. I tried to suggest we all just keep doing what we were doing and refuse to compete. But Emma shut that down immediately. "If the rest of you don't try," she said, her voice sharp, "then I automatically dominate the rankings and you all get cut off except me. Don't you see? They've made it, so we have to compete." Ethan pointed out something even worse. Not trying might be worse than competing, because Mom's subjective character assessment could punish us for not making an effort. We were trapped in a system designed to turn us against each other, and there was no way out without losing everything. Within the first week, everything changed. Mom put the monthly rankings on the refrigerator, where we'd see them every single day. Emma's name at the top in green marker. Mine second in blue. Ethan third in yellow. Jake's name at the bottom in red. Seeing our names arranged like that, like a leaderboard, it changed how we looked at each other. Emma stopped helping Jake with his homework because raising his grades might lower her relative position. Ethan started staying up until 2 in the morning working on extra credit projects to close the gap between us. I found myself constantly checking on what my siblings were doing, comparing my efforts to theirs, calculating whether I was falling behind. The allowances reflected our rankings too. Emma got $220 a month. I got $120. Ethan got $60. Jake got $25. Jake asked why his allowance had been cut from the $60 he used to get. Dad said limited resources needed to be allocated to the children with the most promise. School became a nightmare of constant comparison. Emma and I were both juniors at the same high school, so every test score, every assignment grade felt like ammunition in the competition. When she got a 95 on a history test and I got a 91, I saw her smile as she calculated how it would affect the rankings. When I made the debate team and she didn't, she spent the entire car ride home in seething silence. Our parents had always valued academic achievement, but now it felt weaponized. Every success I had threatened Emma's position. Every success, she had pushed me further from safety. Ethan had it different because he was in a different grade, so he didn't compete with us directly in classes. But I could see the pressure destroying him. He'd always been more artistic than academic, better at drawing and music than math and science. Now he was forcing himself to fit a mold that wasn't who he really was. The character assessment category became a weapon for psychological warfare. Mom would deduct points for things like having a messy room, speaking disrespectfully, or showing a bad attitude. These were completely subjective judgments that she could manipulate however she wanted. Ethan lost 5 character points when he argued with Dad about whether the competition was fair. I lost 3 points for forgetting to take out the trash one time. Emma quickly figured out that the best way to maintain her position was to be perfectly obedient and pleasant at all times, never questioning our parents' decisions. She transformed into this artificial version of herself, always smiling, always helpful, always playing the role of the perfect daughter. Jake struggled the most with character assessment because he was 14 and still acted like a kid. He lost points for leaving toys out, talking too loud, watching too much TV. Normal 14-year-old behavior became failures in Mom's scoring system. 3 months into the competition, Emma's boyfriend broke up with her. She'd stopped seeing him on weekends because she needed the time for extra studying and volunteering. She'd canceled plans to attend networking events that might improve her leadership score. When he told her she'd changed, that she wasn't the girl he'd started dating anymore, she didn't even seem sad. She just said being single would give her more time to focus on winning. I watched my sister transform into someone I barely recognized, someone who'd sacrificed her actual life and relationships for a competition our parents had created. When I tried to talk to her about it, she accused me of trying to sabotage her because I was jealous of her first-place ranking. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was jealous. Or maybe I was just scared of what this competition was doing to all of us. Ethan started having panic attacks in the middle of the night. I'd wake up to the sound of him hyperventilating in the bathroom, and I'd sit outside the door talking him through breathing exercises until he calmed down. He was terrified of coming in last and being completely cut off. Our parents had made it clear that the child who finished last would get nothing. No college fund, no family connection, no support of any kind after age 18. Ethan had 2 more years until he could leave, and the thought of being homeless and alone at 18 terrified him. I tried to tell him I wouldn't let that happen, that we'd stick together no matter what the rankings said. But we both knew I couldn't protect him if our parents decided to completely cut him off. I was just another kid trapped in the same system. The household contributions category turned our home into a competitive nightmare of chores and obligations. Emma started waking up at 5 in the morning to clean the kitchen before anyone else could. I started doing yard work and repairs that nobody had asked for just to earn extra points. Ethan took over all of Jake's assigned chores and did them himself because Jake was too young to meet Mom's standards. We were competing to see who could devote more time and energy to housework, turning basic household responsibilities into a ranking system. Mom kept detailed records of everything we did, timing how long each task took and grading the quality of our work. She'd inspect the bathroom after someone cleaned it, deducting points if she found a single hair in the sink or a streak on the mirror. The house had never been cleaner. It had also never felt more hostile. 6 months in, Jake started wetting the bed again. He hadn't done that since he was 7 years old. The pressure of being in last place, of seeing our parents' disappointed faces every day, it was breaking him down. He was 14 years old, and he thought he was a failure because he couldn't compete with kids 4 and 6 years older than him. I found him crying in the garage one afternoon. He told me he wished he'd never been born so our parents wouldn't be disappointed in him. That moment broke something inside me. I marched into my parents' bedroom and demanded they stop the competition. I told them what it was doing to Jake, how he was falling apart under the pressure. My father listened without expression, then said, "Jake needs to learn that life is competitive and disappointing. If he can't handle pressure now, he'll never survive in the real world." The extracurricular category added another layer of competition. Emma joined every club and organization she could find time for, spreading herself thin to build an impressive resume. I focused on fewer activities but aimed for leadership positions, eventually becoming president of the debate team and captain of the academic quiz bowl. Ethan suffered because most of his interests were in areas our parents didn't value. They gave him minimal points for his art portfolio but maximum points for science Olympiad, so he abandoned what he loved to earn points in things he hated. Jake tried joining sports teams but kept getting cut because he was undersized for his age and not particularly athletic. Every rejection felt like more proof that he was the family failure. Mom's scoring system only considered quantifiable results. It didn't account for effort or improvement. Either you won awards and leadership positions, or you got minimal points. After a year of competition, Emma got accepted into Yale's prestigious summer program. It would dramatically boost her ranking and look amazing on college applications. The program cost $10,000 for 6 weeks, and our parents had the money to send her easily. But Dad sat us all down at dinner and said that if Emma went to Yale, there wouldn't be enough money for the rest of us to participate in any summer activities. He could either send one child to an elite program or all 4 of us to regular camps and programs. He asked us to vote on what we should do. Emma immediately voted for Yale, arguing that investing in the most successful child made logical sense. Jake voted for fair distribution because he'd been looking forward to soccer camp all year. Ethan and I were stuck in the middle, knowing that either choice would hurt someone. I voted for fair distribution because I couldn't stand the thought of Jake losing his one activity. Ethan voted the same way. Dad looked disappointed in all of us except Emma. That summer, none of us got our preferred activities because Dad said we'd lost the opportunity by not making a unified decision. Emma didn't go to Yale. Jake didn't go to soccer camp. Ethan didn't go to the art intensive he'd been dreaming about. I didn't attend the debate institute I'd planned on. Instead, we all stayed home where Mom assigned us extra household tasks and our parents lectured us about the consequences of indecision. I realized then that the competition wasn't just about choosing one successful child. It was about training us to sacrifice each other, to prioritize individual advancement over family loyalty, to accept that someone had to lose for anyone to win. We'd failed that lesson by trying to stay united, and our parents were punishing us for it. Ethan's mental health continued to decline over the summer. He stopped eating regularly, losing weight until his clothes hung loose on his body. He quit doing art entirely, abandoning the one thing that used to make him happy. He spent most of his time in his room studying subjects he hated, desperately trying to raise his ranking. When I asked how he was doing, he'd say, "Fine," in this flat tone that meant he was anything but fine. I tried to tell our parents that something was seriously wrong, but they dismissed my concerns as competitive manipulation. Mom said Ethan was just feeling normal pressure from falling short of expectations, and he should work harder instead of seeking sympathy. Dad told me to focus on my own ranking instead of worrying about my siblings. They didn't see, or didn't care, that the competition they created was destroying one of their children from the inside out. The monthly rankings became increasingly arbitrary as Mom adjusted her scoring formula to maintain the hierarchy she wanted. When my grades started outperforming Emma's, Mom suddenly increased the weight of the character assessment category, which let her dock me points for subjective reasons. When Ethan briefly surpassed me in extracurricular points, the formula shifted to prioritize leadership positions over participation. It became obvious that Mom had already decided Emma would win, and the ranking system was just theater to make it look like a fair competition. But we couldn't prove the system was rigged without access to her detailed formula and calculations, which she kept locked in her office. We were forced to keep performing in a competition where the winner had already been chosen. Jake started his freshman year of high school acting out in ways that were completely unlike him. He got into fights at school. He talked back to teachers. He stopped doing his homework. His grades dropped from B's and C's to D's and F's. When our parents confronted him about it, he said there was no point in trying because he knew he'd never catch up to the rest of us. He'd done the math. Even if he got perfect scores in every category, his age and the points he'd already lost would keep him in last place. So why bother trying? Mom and Dad were furious, but I understood what Jake was doing. He was opting out of the competition in the only way he could, by refusing to care about the metrics our parents used to judge him. It was self-destructive, but it was also the only form of control he had left. Halfway through my junior year, Mr. Whitfield, the guidance counselor, called me into his office. He'd noticed troubling patterns in my file. My grades were excellent, but I'd dropped activities I used to enjoy in favor of others that clearly didn't interest me. He asked if everything was okay at home. For the first time, I considered telling an adult what was happening. But what would I say? My parents aren't breaking any laws. They're feeding us, housing us, not physically hurting us. They're just running a competition to decide which child deserves to stay in the family. How do you explain that to someone who doesn't live there? I told Mr. Whitfield everything was fine. I was just trying to strengthen my college applications. He looked at me with this sad expression, like he knew I was lying but couldn't get me to tell the truth. That night, I went to Ethan's room and found him holding a bottle of our mother's sleeping pills. He'd already taken 5 of them. He was sitting there with the bottle, contemplating whether to take more. I grabbed the pills and shook him hard, demanding to know what he was doing. He said he couldn't do it anymore. He couldn't face waking up every day to the reality of failure. He couldn't spend another 2 years trying to win a competition designed to destroy 3 out of 4 of us. I told him he wasn't failing. Our parents were failing us. I stayed in his room all night to make sure he didn't try anything else. And in the morning, I walked downstairs and told our parents what had happened. My father said Ethan was being manipulative, using suicide threats to gain sympathy. My mother docked him 10 character points for emotional instability. They didn't take him to a doctor or a therapist. They didn't stop the competition. They just punished him for breaking under the pressure they'd created. I started documenting everything after that. I kept a journal hidden in my closet where I recorded the monthly rankings, the arbitrary formula changes, the impossible standards, the psychological damage I was witnessing in my siblings. I didn't know what I'd do with this documentation, but I knew I needed to keep some kind of record of what was happening. I needed proof that we weren't crazy, that this situation was as insane as it felt. Emma found my journal one day while looking for something in my room. She read it and immediately attacked me, accusing me of plotting to sabotage her. She threatened that if I showed that journal to anyone outside the family, she'd tell her parents and I'd be punished for disloyalty. I asked her how she could justify what they were doing to us. She said she was protecting her future. She'd worked too hard to let me ruin her chances of winning. As the competition approached its second year, the long-term psychological effects became impossible to ignore. Emma had developed an eating disorder, restricting her food intake because she'd convinced herself that maintaining a certain weight gave her more control over her life. Jake had been suspended from school twice for fighting and was seeing the school counselor weekly for anger management issues. Ethan had stopped sleeping more than 4 hours a night and had developed stress-related eczema all over his arms. I found myself unable to enjoy anything anymore, constantly calculating whether an activity would help or hurt my ranking. We were all performing versions of ourselves that our parents had created. And somewhere along the way, we'd lost track of who we really were underneath the performance. The summer before my senior year, our parents announced that the rankings would continue through college. They'd pay for one child's entire education, half the costs for the second-place child, minimal support for the third-place child, and nothing for fourth. This meant the competition would extend another 4 years, locking us into the system until our early 20s. Emma was thrilled because first place came with complete financial security. The rest of us realized we'd never be free of our parents' control as long as they held the financial leverage. I started researching scholarships and financial aid, preparing for the possibility of having to pay for college completely on my own. Ethan did the same. Jake was only 15 and couldn't think that far ahead, but I could see the despair in his eyes when he realized this nightmare would define his entire adolescence. As my senior year started, Emma had 92 points, I had 84, Ethan had 79, and Jake had 56. The gap between first and last place had grown to 36 points, making it nearly impossible to close in the remaining months before Emma turned 18. She'd essentially won by delivering consistent performance and benefiting from Mom's favoritism. But our parents kept administering the competition anyway. They stressed the importance of all of us continuing to work, compete, and prove our worth. I applied to schools that offered full-ride scholarships because I knew I couldn't count on my parents for anything. Ethan did the same, targeting schools with strong financial aid programs. We were planning our escape routes while still competing in the competition because we had no other choice. In December of my senior year, something changed. Jake stopped going to school entirely. He'd get up, get dressed, leave the house with his backpack, and spend the day at the public library or walking around town. He'd come home at normal school dismissal times so our parents wouldn't notice. He did this for 3 weeks before the school contacted our parents about his absences. The confrontation that followed was brutal. Dad screamed at Jake for wasting his future and opportunities. Mom revised his ranking down to 49 points, the lowest any of us had ever scored. Jake just stood there and took it without defending himself, his face blank. After our parents left, I asked him why he'd stopped going to school. He said it didn't matter anymore. Nothing he did would matter, so why bother trying? I told him it mattered to me, but he just walked away. That was my breaking point. I gathered my documentation journal, evidence of the ranking changes, proof of the psychological harm. And I made an appointment with a family therapist my school counselor had recommended. Her name was Dr. Simmons, and I spent 2 hours in her office explaining everything. She listened without interrupting, taking notes in a way that reminded me terrifyingly of my mother. When I finished, she asked if I felt physically safe at home. I said yes. We weren't being hit or starved or anything like that. She asked if I felt emotionally safe. I didn't have an answer to that. How do you measure emotional safety when you're constantly being evaluated and ranked and told that 3 out of 4 of you don't deserve to be part of the family? Dr. Simmons said what my parents were doing was a form of psychological abuse called conditional love and favoritism abuse, and it could cause long-term harm. She asked if I wanted her to report it to Child Protective Services. I sat in her office trying to decide whether reporting would help or make things worse. CPS investigations are messy and invasive, and they don't always result in change. We might end up in foster care, separated from each other, which could be worse than staying together under our parent system. But if I didn't report it, nothing would change. And Jake would keep falling apart, and Ethan would keep holding bottles of sleeping pills, and Emma would keep starving herself, and I'd plan my escape while my siblings suffered. Dr. Simmons said she was a mandated reporter, which meant if she believed we were in danger, she had to report it regardless of my wishes. She asked me directly, did I believe my siblings were in danger? I thought about Ethan with the pill bottle, Jake's blank expression, Emma's hollow cheeks. I said yes. The CPS investigation started the following week. A caseworker named Patricia Chun came to our house unannounced and asked to speak with each of us separately. Our parents were furious, demanding to know who had reported them and what lies had been told. Patricia stayed calm and professional, saying she was there to ensure our safety and well-being. She interviewed all 4 of us in separate rooms, asking about our daily lives and our relationship with our parents. I told her everything, showed her my documentation journal, and explained the ranking system in detail. Emma staunchly defended our parents, arguing that they were just encouraging us to reach our full potential. Ethan and Jake confirmed my story to varying degrees. Patricia spent 3 hours at our house, photographing the ranking charts on the refrigerator and requesting copies of Mom's scoring journals. My parents were smart enough to present the ranking system as strict but legal parenting. They emphasized that we were fed, housed, educated, and not physically abused. They framed the competition as a motivational framework designed to teach us about real-world pressure. They showed Mom's records as evidence of involved parenting rather than psychological manipulation. Patricia talked to our teachers, our pediatrician, other family members. Most of them said we seemed like high-achieving kids from a strict but successful household. The external appearance was so different from the internal reality that it was nearly impossible to prove abuse was occurring. Patricia told me privately that she believed my story, but she didn't have grounds to remove us from the home. The situation was harmful, but not illegal. She recommended family therapy and would check in periodically, but she couldn't force our parents to stop the competition. After the CPS investigation closed without action, my parents' anger was directed solely at me. They knew I'd reported them, even though I hadn't admitted it directly. Mom dropped my ranking to 68 points, below Ethan for the first time, citing catastrophic failures in character assessment. Dad told me I'd betrayed the family and proven why I didn't deserve their support. Emma stopped speaking to me entirely, as if I'd personally attacked her by calling CPS. Only Ethan and Jake understood why I'd done it, and they were too scared to defend me publicly. I'd sacrificed my position in the competition and likely my relationship with my parents to protect my siblings, and it had accomplished nothing. The rankings continued. The psychological warfare continued. We were still trapped. The college acceptance letters started arriving in March. I got into 3 schools that offered full scholarships, which meant I could leave without depending on my parents for anything. Emma got into 7 prestigious schools, and my parents threw her a celebration party, announcing they'd pay her full tuition and expenses wherever she chose. Ethan got into a public university with limited financial aid, and my parents agreed to cover 20% of his costs, leaving him to figure out the rest. Jake was only 15, but watching the drastically different celebrations for each of our acceptances showed him exactly what his future would look like. In last place, barely acknowledged, left to fend for himself. I had one final conversation with Emma before I left for college. I asked her if winning was worth losing her brothers, watching Jake fall apart, watching Ethan nearly kill himself. She told me I was being dramatic, that everyone was fine, that we'd all thank our parents someday for pushing us to succeed. Asked if she really believed that, or if she was just justifying her choice to participate in their abuse. She said I was jealous and bitter about not winning, and I should focus on my own life instead of trying to drag her down. We haven't spoken since that conversation. When I moved into my dorm in August, she didn't help me pack or say goodbye. Neither did my parents. Only Ethan and Jake came to see me off. And we all cried in the driveway because we knew I was escaping, but they were still stuck in the nightmare. College gave me physical distance from the competition, but I couldn't stop thinking about my brothers. Ethan sent me regular updates about the rankings and Jake's deterioration. Jake had been diagnosed with depression and put on medication, but our parents viewed it as another failure on his part. They docked him character points for needing mental health treatment. Ethan counted down the days until he turned 18 and could legally leave. I sent money from my work-study job whenever I could, knowing he'd need help paying for college that our parents refused to fund. Patricia from CPS continued doing monthly check-ins, but nothing changed because nothing technically illegal was happening. Just 3 children being destroyed by a competition designed to convince them their worth was conditional. I didn't go home the summer after my freshman year. I stayed at school to work and take summer classes. My parents sent me an email saying they were disappointed in my choice, but not surprised given my character deficiencies. Emma posted pictures on social media from their family vacation without me. The 3 of them smiling on some expensive beach. Jake looked thin and miserable in the photos. Emma looked triumphant. Ethan looked like a ghost. The clear winner posing with our parents like she'd earned her place through merit rather than survival. I felt this strange mix of grief, anger, and relief that I wasn't there, that I'd gotten out, even if it meant being erased from the family narrative. Ethan turned 18 in October of my sophomore year. He called me from a bus station at 3 in the morning. He said he'd left, packed a bag, and walked out while everyone was asleep. He was heading to his college town early to find housing and work until classes started. Our parents didn't try to stop him, or even call. They just updated the rankings to show 2 children instead of 3, redistributing the percentages, so Jake sank even lower. Emma was still first with 93 points. I came second with 72 points despite not having lived at home for nearly a year. Jake was last with 51 points. The competition continued even though half the competitors had already left. Jake started calling me every night during my sophomore year. He'd talk about his day, his homework, nothing in particular. And I understood he just needed to hear the voice of someone who cared about him as a person, not as a ranking. He was 15 years old, living essentially alone with our parents and Emma, all of whom viewed him as the family failure. He told me how they'd stopped inviting him to family dinner sometimes, telling him he could eat in his room because he wasn't contributing meaningfully to household conversations. He told me how Emma now had her own car while he still took the bus everywhere. He told me his birthday had passed with just a card from our parents, no celebration or gifts. He was being gradually erased from the family while still living in their house, and I couldn't do much to protect him from 300 miles away. The breaking point came during Jake's sophomore year of high school. He called me at midnight, crying so hard I couldn't understand him. When he finally calmed down enough to speak, he told me he'd found Mom's master planning document on her computer. A detailed timeline showing that after Emma turned 22 and graduated from college, our parents would officially disown the rest of us. They'd already drafted legal documents removing Ethan, Jake, and me from their will. They'd written letters to extended family explaining why they were cutting off 3 of their 4 children. They'd calculated how much money they'd save by only investing in Emma. They'd been meticulously planning this for 3 years, and the competition had just been a way to make us complicit in our own destruction. Jake read parts of the document to me over the phone, and I felt physically sick hearing our parents describe us as poor investments and failed experiments. I drove home the next morning, skipping classes I couldn't afford to miss. I picked up Ethan from his college town on the way. We arrived at the house and demanded a family meeting. Our parents stayed calm when I confronted them with what Jake had found. I asked how they could do this to their own children, how they could deliberately destroy 3 kids while elevating one. My father said they'd given us plenty of opportunities to prove our worth, and we'd failed. He said it was irresponsible to continue investing in children who hadn't shown adequate return on that investment. My mother added that Emma had earned her position through dedication and excellence, while the rest of us had demonstrated we didn't value family enough to work for it. Emma sat there silent, her face unreadable, not defending us, not defending them. I told my parents they'd abused 3 children through competition and conditional love. I said I had 3 years of documentation proving the psychological harm they'd caused, and I was prepared to take it to lawyers, therapists, and media outlets if they didn't stop. My father laughed, saying I had no legal standing, no evidence of any illegal activity, and no resources to fight them. He was right about all of that, but I also had something he didn't expect. I'd been recording the conversation on my phone since the moment we sat down. In that recording, they admitted to planning to disown 3 of their children based on a ranking system they'd manipulated for years. It might not be illegal, but it was damning evidence of their true intentions. I played back the recording and watched my parents' faces change. I told them I wanted the competition to end immediately. I wanted Jake's living situation to improve. And I wanted them to agree to family therapy with an outside counselor, or the recording would go to everyone we knew. Church community, extended family, their coworkers. I would make sure everyone understood exactly what they'd done. It was blackmail, and I'm not proud of it, but I had no other options for protecting my younger brother. My parents sat in silence for a long time before my father agreed to my terms. The ranking charts came down that day. The monthly assessments stopped. Jake was given privacy and respect, things he'd been denied for years. We started family therapy the following week, but my parents spent most of the sessions trying to convince the therapist they'd been misunderstood. The damage was already done. Emma graduated college with full parental support and immediately cut off contact with me, Ethan, and Jake. She'd absorbed the message that we were failures who would drag her down, and she chose our parents' approval over sibling relationships. I'd lost my older sister to the competition, even though I'd technically won the final battle. Ethan took 6 years to finish college because he worked full-time to pay for it without parental support. Jake is 17 now, still living in a house where the competition has technically ended, but the hierarchy and favoritism remain. He's counting the days until he can leave for college and never come back. I graduated with debt from the years I worked 2 jobs and took extra semesters to cover my own expenses because full scholarships don't cover everything. The 3 of us survived, but we're all scarred by what our parents did. 3 years after the competition officially ended, I got a call from Patricia Chun, the CPS caseworker who'd tried to help us. She was writing a paper on long-term psychological abuse in high-achieving families and asked permission to include our story anonymously. I agreed and spent 2 hours on the phone with her describing the competition and its aftermath. She told me she'd seen dozens of cases like ours. Families where parents created elaborate systems to pit children against each other in the name of motivation. She said most of these cases went unreported because the abuse was subtle and sophisticated, disguised behind concepts like healthy competition and high standards. She was trying to develop better frameworks for identifying and intervening in these situations. I gave her my documentation journal, the recording, and my permission to use whatever she needed. If our suffering could help prevent other families from going through the same thing, maybe it would be worth something. Jake left for college last year with a full scholarship to a school 1,500 miles away. He called me from his dorm room, crying with relief that he'd finally escaped. He's working with a trauma therapist, building an identity separate from the rankings and competition. Ethan works in tech now and has cut off all contact with our parents. I talk to him once a week, and we're rebuilding our brother relationship outside the competitive context. We're learning to care about each other without measuring our relative worth. It's strange, difficult, and healing. Emma sends me emails occasionally trying to explain why she chose our parents over us, but I don't respond anymore. She made her choice, and I've accepted the loss of that relationship. I'm 24 years old now, still in therapy, working through how the competition affected my sense of self-worth. Dr. Simmons, that first therapist I talked to, helped me understand that I was always enough, that my value isn't determined by rankings or parental approval or achievements measured and compared. That understanding comes and goes. Some days I believe it. Some days I still catch myself calculating whether I'm doing enough, achieving enough, proving enough. The competition may have ended, but its effects are permanent. My parents created a system that taught us we were only worthy of love if we outperformed each other. And that lesson is deeply embedded in how we see ourselves and the world. My parents still don't think they did anything wrong. In their minds, they pushed us to be successful, and we're all better off for it now. They don't acknowledge the eating disorder, the suicide attempt, the depression, the broken family bonds. They don't take responsibility for creating a competition where 3 children had to lose for 1 to win. They still see Emma as the golden child and the rest of us as failures who didn't work hard enough. I've accepted that I'll never get an apology or acknowledgement from them. The best I can do is break the cycle, build a life based on different values, and make sure I never put anyone through what they put us through. Sometimes I think about what our family could have been if they'd just loved us equally. If they'd celebrated all of our achievements instead of turning them into weapons. If they'd supported our individual interests instead of forcing us into competition. I think about Jake discovering art or music or whatever passion he might have had if he hadn't spent his teenage years convinced he was worthless. I think about Ethan's drawings, the ones he threw away when he was 15 because they didn't earn him enough points. I think about Emma before the competition, when she used to laugh more and had friends and a boyfriend and dreams that weren't just about winning. I think about the 4 of us as kids, before any of this started, when we actually liked each other. That family is gone now. It died the night our parents stood in the living room and announced the competition. What we have now is 3 survivors trying to heal, and 1 sister who chose her abusers over her siblings. We have parents who destroy their family in the name of efficiency and investment returns. We have years of therapy ahead of us, and scars that will never fully fade. Last month, I got a letter from my parents. They're getting older now, and apparently they've been thinking about their legacy. The letter said they wanted to reconcile and move forward as a family. They invited all four of us to a family reunion over the holidays. The letter didn't include an apology. It didn't acknowledge what they'd done. It just talked about how important family is and how they hoped we could put the past behind us. I showed the letter to my therapist. She asked what I wanted to do. The truth is, part of me still wants their approval. That little kid who sat on the couch when I was 16, the one who desperately wanted to believe this was all just a terrible mistake, that my parents would wake up and realize what they were doing, that kid still exists somewhere inside me. But I'm not that kid anymore. I called Ethan and Jake to ask what they thought about the letter. Ethan laughed bitterly and said he'd rather spend the holidays alone than pretend everything was fine. Jake was quiet for a long time before saying he didn't think he could handle being in that house again, seeing those rooms where the ranking charts used to hang. I wrote back to my parents. I kept it short. I told them that reconciliation requires acknowledgement of harm, and they'd never acknowledged what they'd done to us. I said that family isn't about shared DNA or legal obligations. It's about how you treat the people who depend on you. And they taught us that love is conditional, that worth is measured in rankings, and that 3 children could be sacrificed for the success of one. I told them that Ethan, Jake, and I had built our own family now. A family where we support each other without keeping score, where we celebrate each other's successes without feeling threatened, where love isn't something you have to earn through competition. I told them they were welcome to join that family if they were willing to do the hard work of acknowledging the harm they'd caused and making genuine amends. But if they just wanted to pretend the past didn't happen, we weren't interested. I haven't heard back from them. I don't expect to. Emma responded to the letter, though. She sent me an email saying I was being unnecessarily cruel to our aging parents, that I should be grateful for everything they provided, that the competition made us stronger and more successful. She said she'd be attending the family reunion, and she hoped I'd reconsider my decision. I didn't respond to her either, because here's what I've learned. Some people will never understand. Emma spent her formative years learning that her worth was tied to being better than her siblings, and she can't unlearn that without admitting she sacrificed her family for a competition that never should have existed. Admitting that would mean acknowledging that she's complicit, that she chose our parents' approval over protecting her younger brothers, that her success came at the cost of our mental health and family bonds. That's too painful for her to face, so she's rewritten the narrative in her head. In her version, the competition was character building. We're just bitter because we didn't win. Our parents were strict but loving. Everything turned out fine. I used to be angry at Emma for that. Now I mostly just feel sad for her. Because she won the competition, but she lost something more important. She lost the ability to have authentic relationships, to love people without measuring their value, to be vulnerable without calculating the strategic implications. She's 30 years old, successful in her career, living the life our parents engineered for her. And from what I can tell from her social media, she's completely alone. No close friends, no serious relationships, just achievements and awards and the approval of parents who taught her that winning is all that matters. That's her prize for coming in first place. Jake is thriving now, by the way. He's 18, just finished his first semester of college, and he's discovered he loves psychology. He wants to work with families and kids going through trauma. He says our experience, as horrible as it was, gave him insight into how family systems can break down and how people survive psychological abuse. He's turning his pain into purpose, and I'm so proud of him, I could burst. Ethan is doing better too. He picked up art again about a year ago, just for himself, not for points or rankings or approval. He sent me a painting last month, an abstract piece with 4 figures, 3 of them holding hands and 1 standing apart. He didn't explain it, but he didn't need to. As for me, I'm still working through it all. Some days are better than others. I'm in a relationship now with someone who grew up in a healthy family, and it's simultaneously wonderful and terrifying. She doesn't understand why I keep track of chores, why I panic when she achieves something I haven't, why I struggle to celebrate my own successes without comparing them to someone else's. But she's patient with me. She reminds me that love isn't a competition, that her success doesn't diminish mine, that we're on the same team. I'm learning to believe her. I'm also learning to have compassion for that 16-year-old kid who sat on the couch and had his world destroyed. He did the best he could. He protected his siblings when he could, documented the abuse, reached out for help, and eventually forced the situation to change. He survived. We all survived. And that's not nothing. I'm sharing this story because I want people to understand that abuse isn't always obvious. It isn't always physical. Sometimes it's sophisticated and subtle, disguised as high standards or healthy competition or teaching kids about the real world. Sometimes it's parents who genuinely believe they're doing the right thing while they systematically destroy their children's mental health and family bonds. If you're reading this and you see your own family in this story, please know, it's not normal. You're not being too sensitive. The adults in your life are failing you. And if you're a parent reading this, please just love your kids. All of them. Equally. Unconditionally. Don't turn your family into a competition. Don't teach your children that they have to earn your love by being better than their siblings. Don't make them choose between their own well-being and your approval. Because here's what that competition cost my parents. They destroyed 3 of their 4 children for the sake of one. And that one child? She's so damaged by what they did that she can't form authentic relationships or acknowledge the harm she witnessed and participated in. They didn't create 1 successful child and 3 failures. They created 4 traumatized adults who will spend years in therapy trying to unlearn the lessons they were taught. Was it worth it? Was Emma's success worth losing 3 children? Was creating a winner worth destroying a family? My parents would probably say yes. They point to Emma's career, her achievements, her success as evidence that their system worked. But I look at the 4 of us now, 3 siblings in therapy trying to rebuild their sense of self-worth, trying to learn how to have relationships that aren't competitive, trying to figure out who they are without the rankings and judgments. And one sister who chose the approval of abusive parents over her siblings and is now successful, but fundamentally alone. And I think this is what winning looks like in a rigged game. Everyone loses. Some people just don't realize it yet. I'm 24 years old. I have decades ahead of me to heal, to grow, to build a life based on values that aren't about competition and conditional love. Some days I'm hopeful about that future. Some days the weight of what happened crushes me. But I'm here. I'm surviving. And so are Ethan and Jake. We're building something different, something better. A family that isn't based on rankings or performance or proving our worth. A family where we're enough just as we are. That's my inheritance. Not money or approval or conditional love. Just the knowledge that I survived, that I protected my siblings as best I could, and that I broke the cycle. It's not the inheritance my parents promised when I was 16, but it's the only one worth having. And maybe, someday, when I have kids of my own, I'll be able to give them something my parents never gave us. The security of knowing they're loved for who they are, not what they achieve. The freedom to be themselves without being measured against anyone else. The gift of a family that lifts everyone up instead of sacrificing some for the success of others. That's what I'm working toward. That's how I'm breaking the curse my parents put on us. And if you're out there, surviving your own version of this nightmare, please know, you're not alone. You're not being too sensitive. You deserve better. You always deserved better. And someday, when you're free of it, you'll build something better too. I promise.